For 10,000 years, mankind prayed for the emperor to rise from the golden throne. Every war, every sacrifice, every whispered prayer ended the same way. Please wake, please save us, please return. Now it has finally happened. The emperor has opened his eyes. But the moment it begins, the miracle turns into a nightmare. Billions die in a single heartbeat, their minds wiped clean as if they never existed. This is not salvation. This is something far worse. I was there when it happened. I saw it with my own eyes, and what I witnessed still haunts my thoughts. My name is Captain Malchen of the Adeptus Custodes, and I was standing guard when the god of mankind awakened. At first, it seemed small. A faint tremor beneath my boots. A pressure in the air that made it hard to breathe. I felt it before I understood it. Then the golden throne began to glow, not with holy light, but with a power that crushed thought itself. I saw tech priests fall to their knees, screaming in worship and terror at the same time. I felt minds around me collapse like fragile glass. This was not a blessing. This was judgment. The Emperor's awakening did not speak through words. It spoke through destruction. From the throne room, the horror spread outward. I felt it move across Terra like a living force. Entire districts went silent in an instant. Billions of voices vanished from the warp as if they had never been there. I saw the sky burn with golden light as towers collapsed and ships fell from orbit. The Emperor had not even taken a step, and the heart of humanity was already breaking apart. I felt the warp twist and scream as his presence tore through it, burning away things that had existed since the birth of nightmares. Then it went farther. I felt it reach beyond Terra, beyond the Sol system itself. Psychers across the galaxy died where they stood. Navigators clawed at their eyes as their minds shattered. Astropaths fell silent mid-message. The Astronomicon flared like a weapon instead of a beacon, and even the gods of chaos recoiled from the light flooding the warp. Xeno's empires felt it too, ancient minds suddenly aware that something far greater than war had awakened. If this continues, nothing will remain unchanged. This is not a battle that can be fought or a war that can be won. This is an ending written into reality itself. Institutions will collapse. Faith will burn away. Entire species will be judged in a single thought. I felt it clearly in my soul. The Emperor did not wake to save mankind. He woke to decide if mankind deserves to exist at all. I must explain who I am, or none of this will make sense. I am Captain Malchen, one of the 10,000, the Adeptus Custodes. We are not soldiers in the way others understand. We are not conquerors, not heroes sung about in taverns or carved into statues. We are watchers, guardians. We exist for one purpose alone, to stand between the Emperor and all threats, including time itself. While empires rose and burned to ash, we remained. While history forgot names and rewrote truths, we remembered. For 10,000 years, we stood our vigil without rest, without doubt, without hope of change. I have stood within the inner sanctum of the Imperial Palace for over 4 centuries. My armor has never left my body during that time. My halberd has never once been lowered. I watched generations of High Lords age and die. I watched priests preach words they barely understood. I watched tech priests replace sacred mechanisms piece by piece, praying to machines they feared more than they trusted. Through it all, the Emperor remained still. A silent god. A broken man. A corpse sustained by faith, sacrifice, and machinery older than most civilizations. We custodians learned the rhythm of the palace as one learns breathing. Every vibration, every change in temperature, every whisper of energy flowing through the golden throne became familiar. That is why I knew something was wrong before anyone else did. The tech priests dismissed it. The Sisters of Silence felt nothing. But we knew. We always know. The Emperor had not stirred in 10,000 years, and yet, in that moment, the palace itself seemed to hold its breath. Understand this clearly. Nothing ever changes inside the throne room. Not the air. Not the light. Not the silence. It is the most controlled place in the Imperium. That is why fear took root in my mind when control vanished. When the floor trembled. When the pressure built behind my eyes. When the stillness broke. I had prepared my entire existence for an external threat. A demon invasion. A traitor assault. The fall of Terra itself. I was not prepared for the Emperor to wake. We custodians were never meant to see this moment. We were meant to guard a sleeping god forever. That was the truth no one ever spoke aloud. And yet, I was there. Still standing. Still watching. Still alive. That alone should have warned me that fate had already chosen its path. The second tremor came without warning. Stronger. Deeper. It passed through the floor and into my bones, as if the palace itself was crying out. The air grew heavy, thick with unseen force. Every breath felt borrowed. I saw the tech priests begin to move faster, their mechanical limbs clicking with panic they could not hide. Sacred chants faltered. Data streams spiked beyond safe limits. Ancient systems that had never failed began to scream warnings no one had prepared to hear. I felt pressure building inside my skull. Not pain. Something worse. A force pressing against my thoughts, testing the strength of my mind. I had felt null fields before, standing beside the Sisters of Silence in battle. This was different. This was focused. Intelligent. As if a vast presence had noticed me and was deciding whether I should be allowed to exist. I did not move. I did not blink. Custodians do not break position. Even as fear crept into places I believed fear could never reach. Then the light appeared. It did not come from the throne's machinery. It did not come from candles or lumens. It came from him. From the withered form that had sat unmoving for 10,000 years. At first, it was only a faint glow, barely visible against the gold and shadow of the chamber. Then it intensified, growing brighter with every heartbeat until it drowned out everything else. Shadows twisted across the walls, moving where no object should cast them. I heard tech priests cry out as they threw themselves to the floor. Some screamed in joy. Others in terror. The Sisters of Silence began to convulse, blood spilling from beneath their helms. Even their null presence could not protect them from what was happening. I felt my own vision blur as the pressure increased, as if the weight of the Imperium itself had been placed upon my mind. Still, I remained standing. I do not know if that was strength or simply stubborn refusal to fall. Through the blinding radiance, I saw movement. Skeletal fingers, long frozen in death, began to curl. Ancient bones creaked loudly enough to echo through the vast chamber. The Emperor's head slowly began to rise. The sound of stone cracking filled the air as the palace shuddered. Servoskulls fell from the ceiling, their machine spirits extinguished in an instant. Reality itself seemed to bend under the strain of his awakening. And then, he opened his eyes. The moment his eyes opened, the universe screamed. Not through sound, but through existence itself. A wave of psychic force tore outward from the golden throne, ripping through minds like a blade through flesh. I felt it pass through me, cold and sharp, stopping my hearts for a fraction of a second before they hammered back to life. Around me, mortals collapsed instantly. Blood poured from their eyes and ears as their thoughts were erased, not destroyed, simply removed, as if they had never been real. Through the towering viewports of the throne room, I saw Terra begin to die. Columns of golden light erupted from the surface of the world, punching through clouds and atmosphere alike. Entire city blocks folded in on themselves as if crushed by an invisible fist. Sky lanes became rivers of falling metal as ships lost power and plummeted toward the surface. In orbit, vessels exploded in silent flashes, their crews gone before they could even scream. The Emperor had not spoken a word, and yet the planet was already being judged. I alone remained standing among my brothers. Custodians who had faced demon princes and living gods now lay broken at my feet, their auramite armor clattering uselessly against the obsidian floor. I did not understand why I was spared. Perhaps centuries spent beside him had hardened my mind. Perhaps he wished me to see. The light pouring from his eyes was unbearable, like staring into twin suns that burned cold instead of hot. Those eyes did not merely see matter. They saw thought, memory, intention. I felt his gaze settle on me. It peeled me open. Every doubt I had ever buried, every question I had never allowed myself to ask, was laid bare in an instant. I knew then, with terrifying certainty, that this was not the emperor I had been created to serve. This was not the distant, silent guardian humanity prayed to each night. 10,000 years of pain, worship, and betrayal had changed him into something else entirely. Then his voice entered my mind. Not sound, not language. Meaning, forced directly into my thoughts with the weight of eternity behind it. Witness what must follow. As his will spread outward, I felt billions of souls vanish across Terra alone. False saints. Corrupt priests. Those who had twisted his name into a tool for power. Their minds did not burn. They simply ceased. Across the warp, psychers died screaming. Navigators went mad. The Astronomicon flared like a blade, cutting through the Imperium itself. This was no awakening. This was a reckoning. I felt his power stretch farther, beyond Terra, beyond the Sol system, reaching out like invisible hands across the galaxy. Wherever it touched, judgment followed. I did not see it with my eyes, but I felt it in my soul. Entire worlds went silent in a single instant. Populations measured in billions lost their thoughts, their memories, their very sense of self. Not because they fought him. Not because they resisted. But because they were found lacking by a mind older than empires. The warp itself recoiled. I sensed it twist and burn as his presence pushed into it, tearing through currents that had existed since before humanity learned to write. Demons screamed as they were unmade. Ancient horrors fled from a light they could not endure. Even the gods of chaos, beings worshipped and feared across countless worlds, felt something new in that moment. Fear. They were no longer hunters. They were prey. Xenos felt it too. Distant minds stirred in panic as the galaxy realized something fundamental had changed. Ancient empires that had survived for millions of years sensed a force that did not care about borders, species, or history. The Emperor's awakening was not aimed at enemies alone. It was aimed at everything. Reality itself was being measured, weighed, and corrected. I understood the truth then. If this continued, there would be no Imperium left. No faith. No institutions. No familiar order to cling to. Civilization itself would be stripped down to whatever the Emperor deemed worthy of survival. This was not war. War's end. This was not conquest. Conquest preserves something. This was judgment on a scale no mortal mind was meant to witness. I stood alone in the ruins of the throne room, surrounded by bodies and shattered icons, and felt something I had never felt before in all my centuries of service. Doubt. Not doubt in my loyalty. Not doubt in my duty. Doubt in what obedience now meant. Humanity had prayed for this moment for 10,000 years. They had begged for the Emperor to wake and save them. He had awakened. And now the galaxy would learn the terrible price of answered prayers. Through the blinding light, I saw his form begin to change. The withered body that had sat bound to the golden throne for 10 millennia no longer looked like a corpse. It was still thin, still marked by unimaginable suffering, but it was no longer empty. Golden energy flowed through cracked flesh and ancient bone, filling him not with life as mortals understand it, but with something far greater. The tubes and sacred mechanisms that had sustained him for ages began to tear free, metal softening and melting as if ashamed to touch him. He rose from the throne slowly, not as a man standing, but as a force asserting itself. When his feet touched the obsidian floor, the stone rippled outward, no longer solid, no longer obeying the rules it once followed. Each step distorted reality itself. The chamber groaned in protest. The palace, the city, the planet strained beneath the weight of his presence. I followed behind him without realizing I had moved. My body obeyed before my mind could question it. His shape was no longer fixed. A silhouette of blazing gold, shifting and unstable, as if the idea of a single form was beneath him now. Only his face remained constant. I recognized it from statues, from ancient banners, from stories whispered by soldiers before battle. The face that had united humanity. The face Horus had seen at the end. But the eyes were different. Those eyes were no longer human. They burned with knowledge and judgment beyond mercy. He stopped before me. I felt small in a way I never had before. My armor grew hot, humming in perfect resonance with his presence. My weapon vibrated in my hands, its power field flaring uncontrollably. Then his voice entered my mind again, heavier now, more focused. Rise, Malshan, last of my true guardians. There is work to be done. I found myself standing, though I did not remember kneeling. He looked through me, not at me. My memories unfolded before him like open pages. Centuries of duty. Endless vigilance. The slow decay of the Imperium I had watched without comment or question. I felt his displeasure grow, cold and sharp. They abandoned the truth. They chose ignorance over knowledge. They turned my vision into a cage of faith and fear. His attention shifted outward, toward the galaxy burning under his awakening. In that moment, I knew the truth with terrible clarity. The Emperor had returned, not to restore the Imperium, but to unmake it. And whatever came next would change humanity forever. He moved past me, his attention already focused far beyond the palace walls. As he walked, I felt his will spreading outward again, more controlled now, but no less absolute. Minds were touched, measured, sorted. Some vanished in silence. Others endured, shaken but alive. I could not see the pattern, but I sensed it existed. This was no random destruction. This was deliberate, cold, precise, and that frightened me more than chaos ever had. We passed through halls that had once been filled with voices and power. Now they were tombs. High lords lay lifeless in their seats, their expressions frozen in shock. In places where faith had burned the brightest, death had been most complete. Chapels stood silent, their golden icons melted into shapeless ruin. I followed a being I had worshipped in all but name, and with every step, the Imperium I had known ceased to exist. At the Eternity Gate, resistance awaited us. Space Marines stood in formation, weapons lowered but ready. Veterans of 1,000 wars. Sons of his gene craft. They should have inspired pride. Instead, I felt only dread. Their captain spoke with courage, questioning what was happening, begging for restraint. The Emperor listened. Then he showed them the truth. Not through words, but through revelation. I saw it reflected in their eyes. The flaws in their gene seed. The pride that had replaced wisdom. The obedience that had smothered understanding. They saw it too. Some fell to their knees. Some wept. Only their captain remained standing, declaring loyalty and love. The Emperor answered with annihilation. One thought. One instant. The captain ceased to exist. The rest followed, erased without anger, without pause. I stood frozen. These were not enemies. They were creations. Tools shaped for a purpose, discarded when they no longer met the standard. His attention turned to me again, and I felt my thoughts laid bare. I wondered if this was justice. If this was what humanity had prayed for. He answered without speaking. This is transformation, Malshan. Not extinction. He showed me the Imperium as it truly was. Hive worlds of endless suffering. Faith used as a chain. Knowledge buried beneath ritual. Survival purchased by crushing the human spirit. I could not deny what I saw. And yet, beneath the horror, I also saw courage. Kindness. Hope, fragile but real. People who had endured not because of power, but because they believed tomorrow could be better. That was when doubt truly took hold. If he continued, humanity would be reshaped into something pure, something stronger. But most would not survive the process. Standing beside him, feeling his power tear the galaxy apart and rebuild it at the same time, I realized the impossible truth. The greatest threat to mankind was no longer chaos, or Xenos, or war. It was the God who had finally answered their prayers. The doubt grew heavier with every step I took behind him. I had been created to serve without question. Obedience was woven into my bones, into my thoughts, into my very soul. And yet, watching the Imperium collapse under his judgment, I felt something I had never allowed myself to feel before. I felt responsibility. If I remained silent, then I was no longer just a guardian. I was an accomplice. He showed me more. With a single gesture, reality bent, and my vision expanded beyond the palace. I saw Terra from above, burning and breaking under golden storms. I saw hive cities where billions lived and died without ever seeing the sky. I saw children born into chains, taught faith instead of understanding, obedience instead of thought. I saw worlds stripped bare to feed distant wars. I saw an empire that kept humanity alive by slowly killing everything that made life worth living. This is not my Imperium, his voice said within my mind. This is a mockery built from fear and ignorance. They named me a god and used my name to justify endless suffering. His anger was vast, but beneath it I sensed something else. Weariness. Pain older than history. 10,000 years of watching his dream rot while he was trapped, unable to speak, unable to act. He showed me the past as well. The Great Crusade. Worlds brought into unity through reason, not terror. The hope he once held for humanity's future. Then the betrayal. Horus. The war that shattered everything. The moment his broken body was carried to the golden throne. And the long, endless agony that followed. 10,000 years of worship hammering against his mind, shaping him into the very god he never wanted to be. They changed me, Malshan. Their faith changed me. And now I act as the god they created. His words were not an excuse. They were a fact. A truth spoken without pride or shame. And that truth terrified me more than his wrath ever could. A god shaped by suffering does not rule with mercy. A god shaped by pain does not forgive easily. He turned back to the galaxy, his power still spreading, still judging. Entire institutions were collapsing in moments. High lords vanished. Inquisitors were stripped of their authority and forced to face every innocent life they had destroyed. Priests lost their faith as the truth burned through them. For many, death followed. For others, something worse. Understanding. I knew then that if nothing changed, humanity would survive only as a shadow of itself. Stronger, perhaps. Cleaner. But smaller. Emptier. And in that moment, I made a choice no custodian was ever meant to make. I chose to speak. My lord, I said, forcing the words through the crushing weight of his presence. I cannot allow this to continue. The pressure became unbearable. His attention locked onto me fully, and I felt my armor heat, my body strain, my mind scream. You would stand against me, Malshan? You would defend this broken Imperium? I did not look away. I could not. If I did, humanity would lose its last voice. I would defend humanity, I said. Not the Imperium you see, but the people within it. Flawed. Afraid. Enduring. They survived 10,000 years of darkness believing in you. They deserve more than judgment. They deserve guidance. For a long moment, he said nothing. The galaxy trembled as his power paused, balanced on the edge of annihilation. And in that silence, I felt the fate of trillions hang on a single thought. The pressure did not vanish, but it changed. It no longer felt like a hammer meant to crush me. It felt like a weight being tested, measured. I remained standing, though my armor was warped and blackened, my body burning beneath it. His eyes studied me, not with anger, but with something colder and far more dangerous. Consideration. You ask for mercy for a species that betrayed everything I built, he said. You ask me to guide those who turned truth into superstition and freedom into chains. I forced myself to breathe. Each breath felt like fire. Yes, my lord, I said, because that is who you were. Not a god of punishment, but a leader, a teacher. You believed humanity could grow beyond its flaws. That belief is why they followed you in the first place. Has 10,000 years of suffering erased that belief, or only buried it beneath pain? The moment the words left my mind, I knew they could not be taken back. For a long time, he was silent. His gaze turned outward again, touching stars and minds far beyond my understanding. I felt his power shift in the warp, no longer striking blindly, but pausing, examining more carefully. Billions still died, but billions more did not. The judgment slowed. The light that had burned now searched. I felt something I never thought possible. Hesitation. Perhaps, he said at last, my judgment has been shaped too deeply by pain. Perhaps I have become the god they made me, rather than the man I once was. His presence eased slightly, enough that I could remain standing without screaming. I will not return to the golden throne. That prison ends now. The imperial cult will fall. The lies will end. But the destruction, the total erasure, I will reconsider. Relief hit me so hard my legs nearly gave way. The galaxy did not stop changing, but it no longer felt like it was being torn apart. It felt like it was being cut open, carefully, painfully, but with purpose. He turned back to me, his expression no longer purely judgment. You will serve me in what comes next, Malshan. Not as a silent guardian, but as my voice among those who cannot endure my presence. Reality shifted around us. We stood within the Senatorum Imperialis, the chamber where the High Lords had once ruled in his name. Their seats were empty. Their power was gone. He gestured for me to stand at his side. This is where we begin again. The Imperium will end, but humanity will not. What comes next will be difficult. There will be resistance. There will be war. But there will also be hope. I understood then that nothing would ever return to what it had been. Faith would be challenged. Power would be stripped away. Humanity would be forced to face itself without comforting lies. And yet, for the first time since his awakening, I felt something other than fear. I felt possibility. The Emperor was awake. The galaxy trembled. The gods watched in silence. And mankind stood at the edge of a future that was no longer written in stone. Whether it led to destruction or rebirth was no longer certain. But this time, humanity would not face it alone. The work began immediately. There were no announcements, no grand proclamations echoing across the stars. There was no need. Every mind touched by the warp already felt it. The Emperor was awake, and the age of quiet decay was over. His judgment continued, but it was no longer blind. It was deliberate. Those who had built their power on cruelty and lies were removed. Some were erased. Others were left alive to carry the weight of what they had done. The difference mattered. Terra changed first. Hive spires were opened to light and air for the first time in thousands of years. Factories that had poisoned the world were silenced and rebuilt. Knowledge long locked away by ritual and fear was released. Mars trembled as the cult Mechanicus was stripped of superstition and forced to remember why innovation had once defined them. Many resisted. Many did not survive that resistance. But others emerged transformed, freed from doctrines that had buried progress beneath prayer. Across the galaxy, the same pattern repeated. The Imperium did not collapse into chaos, as so many had feared. It unraveled, thread by thread. Systems once ruled by terror were reorganized. Faith was not destroyed, but reshaped. The Emperor did not allow himself to be worshipped again. Churches became places of learning. Prayers became reflections on responsibility and potential. It was painful. Many minds broke under the loss of certainty, but others grew stronger than they had ever been. The enemies of mankind watched closely. Chaos recoiled, wounded but not destroyed. Xeno's empires hesitated, unsure whether to flee, fight, or negotiate. For the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy did not see humanity as a decaying corpse clinging to survival. It saw something dangerous, something awake, something changing. I traveled as his voice, his witness, his reminder. I spoke to worlds that could not survive his presence. I carried truth where lies had ruled for centuries. I faced hatred, fear, and rebellion. I also saw hope take root where none had existed before. Ordinary humans, no longer crushed beneath impossible systems, began to imagine futures beyond survival. The Imperium of old is gone. The one built on fear, ignorance, and blind obedience will never return. What replaces it is uncertain. It will stumble. It will bleed. It will make mistakes. But it will be human again. So what happens when the Emperor wakes? Everything changes. Gods tremble. Empires fall. Faith is tested. And humanity is forced to face itself without excuses. Whether this new age leads to extinction or transcendence is not yet known. But for the first time in 10,000 years, the future is not a slow death. The Emperor is awake. And the galaxy will never sleep the same way again. And yet, even as hope began to spread, I knew the danger was not over. Change invites resistance, and the galaxy had grown comfortable in its suffering. Entire sectors rebelled rather than surrender old certainties. Warlords rose, claiming they alone spoke for the true Emperor. Some Space Marine chapters refused reform, clinging to traditions older than reason. They were not destroyed, but isolated, given the choice to evolve or fade into irrelevance. Not all chose wisely. Beyond human space, the great threats gathered. Chaos did not forgive. The warp still boiled with hatred and hunger, wounded but far from dead. The Tyranid fleets continued their slow approach from the void, uncaring about gods or empires. Ancient machines stirred on forgotten worlds, calculating futures that did not include humanity at all. The Emperor saw these dangers clearly. He did not promise safety. He promised struggle. I stood beside him as worlds were rebuilt and others were abandoned. I watched alliances form where hatred once ruled. I watched humanity learn, slowly and painfully, to live without blind faith. Many failed. Many fell. But many more stood taller than they ever had before. They questioned. They learned. They chose. That alone changed everything. Sometimes, when the work slowed and the galaxy grew quiet for a moment, I felt his weariness. He carried the weight of every choice, every life spared, every life lost. He was no longer a silent god on a throne, nor a wrathful judge unbound. He was something more dangerous and more necessary. A guide walking among a species still learning how not to destroy itself. I remain what I have always been. A guardian. But now I guard not a throne, not a body, not a god. I guard a future that has not yet taken shape. A fragile thing, born from ruin and hope in equal measure. My duty is no longer silence. It is witness. It is warning. It is memory. So when people ask what truly happened when the Emperor finally woke, I tell them this. He did not end the galaxy. He did not save it either. He forced it to grow up. And growth, as humanity is learning, is far more terrifying than destruction. The Emperor is awake. The age of comfort is over. The age of choice has begun. The future now stretches wide and uncertain before us. There is no final victory waiting at the end of this path. No moment where all wars end and suffering vanishes forever. The Emperor knows this, and so do I. Humanity will still struggle. It will still fail at times. But it will no longer be trapped in a cycle of decay disguised as survival. It will move forward, even when the path is painful. I have seen worlds take their first true steps into a better age. I have also seen worlds reject it and tear themselves apart rather than let go of old lies. Both outcomes are part of the price of freedom. The Emperor does not force obedience anymore. He demands understanding. And that demand is heavier than any chain ever forged. There are moments, rare and quiet ones, when I see something familiar in him. A glimpse of the man he once was. The leader who believed humanity could stand without gods or masters. Those moments do not last long, but they are enough to remind me why I chose to speak when silence would have been safer. Why I stood when kneeling would have spared me pain. My name is Malshan. I was created to guard a throne that no longer exists. Now I guard a future that has not yet been written. I will stand as long as I am able, watching, remembering, and warning those who forget how close they came to annihilation by their own answered prayers. So remember this truth. When the Emperor woke, the galaxy did not end. It changed. Faith was tested. Power was stripped bare. Humanity was forced to face itself without comforting illusions. What comes next will not be easy. It will not be gentle. But it will be real. The Emperor is awake. The long night is over. And for the first time in 10,000 years, mankind must decide what it truly wants to become. There are still nights when I remember the silence of the throne room before it all began. The stillness that lasted 10,000 years. In some ways, that silence was easier than what we face now. Silence demands nothing. Change demands everything. Humanity must now live without the excuse of a sleeping god. Every choice, every failure, every triumph belongs to them alone. I see it in the people I meet across the stars. Some look at me with hope, others with fear, many with anger. They ask why their world was judged while another was spared, why their faith was taken while another belief survived. I have no simple answers for them. There are none. The Emperor does not offer comfort anymore. He offers truth, and truth cuts deeper than any blade. The galaxy watches us closely. Allies test our words. Enemies test our strength. Chaos whispers that this rebirth is only another lie. That humanity will fall again, as it always has. Perhaps it will. The Emperor knows this risk better than anyone. That is why he no longer seeks perfection. He seeks resilience. Minds that can bend without breaking. Souls that can question without collapsing. Sometimes, I wonder what history will call this age. The Second Dawn. The Great Unmaking. The Age of Choice. Names matter less than outcomes. What matters is that humanity is no longer sleepwalking toward extinction. It is awake now. Afraid. Unsteady, but awake. I was forged to stand still forever. To be unchanging in a universe of decay. Fate demanded something different of me. It demanded that I doubt. That I speak. That I stand between a god and his creation and say, enough. That moment will follow me for as long as I exist. Whatever I become in the ages to come, that choice will define me more than any oath I ever swore. So if you hear the old prayers whispered in dark places, prayers begging the Emperor to save us, remember this. Salvation is not coming. Guidance is. The future will not be handed down from a throne. It will be built by human hands, flawed and uncertain, but finally free to try. The Emperor is awake. The galaxy is watching. And humanity has no one left to blame but itself. And that is the final truth I have learned since the Emperor rose from the golden throne. Power alone does not save a species. Faith alone does not protect it. Survival without growth is only a slower kind of death. For 10,000 years, humanity endured by clinging to the past, by repeating rituals and obeying commands it no longer understood. That age is gone. It died the moment his eyes opened. The Emperor no longer stands above mankind as a distant idol. He walks beside it as a force that demands responsibility. He will not catch humanity every time it falls. He will not forgive every mistake. He will not shield it from the consequences of its own choices. That burden now belongs to us. To every world, to every citizen, to every mind willing to think instead of kneel. I remain at his side, not as a silent blade, but as a witness to what comes next. I will see victories that justify hope and failures that break hearts. I will see humanity tested in ways no enemy ever could. And when doubt returns, as it always does, I will remember the moment I stood before a god and chose to speak for those who could not. So when history asks what happened when the Emperor finally woke, let it be recorded clearly. He did not bring peace. He did not bring ruin. He brought choice. He forced mankind to confront itself without illusion, without excuses, without a throne to hide behind. The Emperor is awake. The old Imperium is gone. The future is unwritten. And for the first time in 10,000 years, humanity must decide, not what it will worship, but what it will become.